You are now part of a social experiment.
See now where my limit is. Only got no O's.
So you've mentioned that juvenile defendants under the age of 18 are 3 times more likely to be falsely confess to crimes. So when I looked at that stat, the minute I looked at it, I'm thinking Central Park Five, right? I know that incident had a lot of things that you probably looked at and were like, all right, that should have been done. They shouldn't have said that. Parents should have done that. Like, so with looking at that, I know a lot of people are familiar with it from the Ava DuVernay's documentary, When They See Us, and all of that. So when looking at that incident, what do you see that were like some like red flags and things that the kids shouldn't have done, the parents shouldn't have done, and that should have been dealt with better?
It's funny that you mentioned that. So I actually use that in the curriculum that I have that I go into schools, but I don't use the fictionalized version When They See Us. Although she did a phenomenal job with that, I use the actual footage from their confessions. Is you can find it on PBS. And so I got an account on PBS. I downloaded it, whatever, and I played that because I want them to see little boys who look like them, the same age as them, and say, oh, wow, that could easily be me. So I got to throw this out before I answer that question. So this is where Chicago does hold the record. We are actually the false confession capital of the world. We have held the record, at least for the last 5 years, of having the most wrongful convictions that were later exonerated. In fact, in the city of Chicago, we have more than 50% of those in the entire nation. So anyway, so yes, I talk about that. And the main thing I teach my students is your mama can't save you. And so what do I mean? Each one of those boys, except for who's the one who, Yusef, who ran for office and won? Yeah. So except for him, his mama pulled him out. But everybody else had a grandmama, a mama, a sister, a daddy, and a mama sitting next to them while they gave this false confession. What does that tell you? It tells you that having a parent present is not who you should be asking for. You should be asking for a lawyer. So none of them probably had the wherewithal, had the know-how, had any of that, but they should have asked for a lawyer. And what asking for a lawyer does is it stops the interrogation. So I tell my students that when a lawyer comes to a police station to represent you, we serve 3 purposes. One, obviously, we're going to go in and tell you what your rights, tell you how the process works, and tell you to shut up. Number 2, we're going to tell the police officer that you ain't got nothing to say. And number 3, we're going to serve as your witness. So in case you are beat, you are tortured, as again, Chicago holds the record on that. In case you are tortured by police, you are beat up by police, you are harmed in some way, or simply they say that you blurted out a confession an hour after I leave, well, guess what? That's a problem because this kid lawyered up, and any confession that they later make, whether they actually said it or the cops made it up.
I think when I was about 15 to 16, me and my cousins were leaving our house to go into my cousin's car, and we were about to go hang out. And literally, when my cousin's opening up the door, police officers stop him, and they start yelling at us. And this is right in front of my house, and they tell us to sit down on the pavement. So I'm sitting down on the pavement in front of my house. Another police car comes. By like in the next 5 minutes, I got like 6, 7 police cars in front of my house. They're flashing lights in my cousin's car. They ask him to search the car. So we don't know any rules right now. My cousin's about 17, 18, and they ask him to search the car. They got the flashlights on there. They search all through the car, search the trunk, search everything. And we didn't know what was going on. They didn't find anything. And I'm like curious at this age right now. I'm like, what's going on? The police sergeant comes and he dismisses everybody. And that was going to be it. So I'm like, I talked to the police sergeant. I'm like, excuse me, sir. Like, did we do something wrong? What happened? And he was like, well, there was a shooting and robbery a few blocks down, and you guys fit the description. And I was like, what was the description? And he just looked at me and walked away. And now you're saying that, I'm like, how should have that been handled? Because they could have found whatever, like.
Yeah, so you fit the description. This is something else I talk about. So I actually do an exercise where I have kids stand up. I say, I'm going to yell out a descriptor. If it fits you, stand up. If the next descriptor fits you too, continue standing. If not, sit down. So I'll say black, everybody stands up. Male, the girls sit down. I'll be like 15 to 25. Everybody stays standing. I'll be like between 5'5" and 6'2", everybody stays standing. Then I'll be like black hoodie, and still I'll have about half the boys standing. I'll be like, you fit the description. And they'll be like, what? I'm like, those are the descriptions cops get over the radio. It's not like Criminal Minds or the SUV show. They don't get a video, even if a video exists. They don't get a picture, even if a picture exists. They get a quick call saying, stop anybody in the vicinity who looks like this. And the number one descriptor is black male. And they usually don't have facial hair. That's not part of the description. Complexion oftentimes isn't part of the description. Hair may not be part of the description. Height, and if the height is there, it's going to be broad, 5'7" to 6'2". The age is going to be 15 to 25. So what they're going to do is the great roundup. They're going to round up everybody in the area. And so all they're saying is they got a call about some black boys or some black men who had robbed somebody. So they stopping every black man they see in the vicinity.
That is interesting. So we shouldn't have said anything. And
no, you should have said, I do not consent.
I do not consent. Okay, I got it.
All right. I do not consent does not stop the search, though. What it does is it helps you on the back end. If you get arrested, it helps me fight your case in court. Because oftentimes what happens is police officers are stopping you. I don't know, Chicago and New York, same thing, stop and frisk. Whether it's legal or illegal, they still going to do it. Hey, kid, come here. They pat you down. They're looking for something. If you say, I do not consent, first of all, they're like, oh, this kid knows something. And might know somebody. It's better than, I know my rights. No, don't say I know my rights. Say, I do not consent. And then when they do that search anyway, guess who they got to explain to now in court? The judge. I had a 15-year-old kid, same thing. A kid, come here, pass him down. They find a gun. He says nothing. They take him. I end up taking him, representing him in court. And in court, the kid wasn't in the hot seat. The cop was. Because the kid was very articulate. He was like, I was walking down the street. Walking down the alley. I didn't do anything wrong. I complied with the police officer. I was polite. No, I shouldn't have had a weapon. But they didn't receive a call saying he had done anything wrong. The gun wasn't visible. And so the cop starts tap dancing about how it is you start digging in this kid's waistband and you haven't been called to stop him for any reason. And that's why we won. Because he could not articulate what it was that drew his attention to this kid, why he stopped him, why he patted him down, and why he conducted this illegal search. So simply saying, I do not consent, or saying nothing, my preference is I do not consent, because then if you don't say anything, the cop will be like, well, he didn't object. He told me I could search him. He handed me his book bag. He invited me into his house for tea. You have to say, I do not consent.
Wow. Thank you for that one. So I'm thinking about another childhood experience. So my grandmother lived a few blocks from my house, and I would walk to my grandmother's house and she would cook, and then she would give me like aluminum plates with food to bring back to my mom and, for us or whatever. So I'd walk over to bring it back. And on 2 occasions, police officers stopped me. And I was probably like 11 years old, 12 years old. They stopped me and they asked me for ID. And I have ID on me. I was 11, 12 years old. And then they were like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, it's food. Like, I'm like, it's, I'm bringing food home. They're like, can you open it? So I had to unpackage all the food, take everything out, and open it, and for him to observe and look at it. And he was like, all right, thank you. And, he's like, you're free to go. And that was that. So it happened a couple of times. Was I able to say no, like, and just say, I don't want to open it, or I don't consent to this? Or
you always don't ever just say no, because no has no power. You say, I do not consent. And then you say, I want a lawyer, which has a lot of power. Because what that tells the cop immediately is this kid knows something. He actually knows his rights. And that means an adult in his life taught him his rights, and we should fear the adult who taught him his rights. So you're going to say, I do not consent. So I'll tell you my childhood experience. So I was about 13. I was in a program during the summer. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. So I was in a math and science program. I was in a bunch of math and science programs. This one was on a college campus. I went with a bunch of my friends, and it was far from our house. So we all rode the train together, about 80 blocks. And so these dummies find out that there are tunnels underneath the school. And of course, they want to explore the tunnels. I want to explore the tunnels too, but I'm the goody goody and I'm not about to get in trouble. So can we just get on this train and go home? So they're all like, no, we're going to explore the tunnels. I'm not fearless. I'm not going to get on the train by myself and ride 80 blocks. So I was like, okay, I'll go with these nuts. And so we go into the tunnels. They start running around like banshees. They find a big pile of mail. And I don't know how I knew playing with the mail was a federal offense. So they start jumping up and down and throwing the mail in the air. And I'm just like, please stop. Can we just go? Before I can get the words out, I hear police. I mean, multiple police, probably about 6 police officers. So they don't even have enough handcuffs for us because there were about 9 of us. So they just marched us in a single file line to their police station. And I'm just like, my mama is going to kill me. So we get in there, we all sit down, and there's one boy the same age as me. And, they're all like, who are you? What's your name? Do you have same thing? Do you have ID? Where do you live? We don't have ID because we're like 12 and 13. He jumps up. He says, nobody say a word. We all want a lawyer. I didn't know what he was talking about, but his mom was a lawyer. She had taught him this. And so I'm just kind of looking at him like, and I'm the talkative one. So he keeps looking like, don't try it. We sat there for 3 hours. No one said their name. I know this because we were 3 hours late getting home, but no one said their name. No one had an ID. No one said, they didn't know where we came from. They didn't know that we were in this program. They didn't know who we belonged to. They didn't know what part of the city we were from because we were all from different parts of the city. And so after 3 hours, they let us go. And so I learned in that moment the power of silence. Just shut up. We didn't, shut up and then lawyer up. And that's what my shirt says. Shut up and lawyer up. And so I learned from that and didn't even really click until I became a lawyer that I realized how powerful that moment was and how he had really protected all of us. I don't know what kind of trouble we would have gotten into, but we got into no trouble because there was no arrest because everybody was released. And it works the same for adults. 9 times out of 10, if somebody calls me because a cop is looking for them or a detective has been to the house a couple times or God forbid they're already in custody and the parents trying to get me to the police station, 10 times out of 10, the cop is pissed when I walk in the door. They hate seeing me come. And then when I get there, 9 times out of 10, my client walks out right after I walk out because they were waiting for you to fall on the sword. They were waiting for you to tell on yourself. They usually are quite lazy and don't really have much evidence. So they're like, well, if we get this dumb kid in here, he'll tell us everything we want to know. Come tell your side of the story. That's what they'll say. Come tell your side of the story. And you gladly want to show how you were justified, street justification, not court justification. And then you talk yourself into an arrest. And so the minute I get there and I shut that down, they usually don't have enough to move forward with the case. And my client ends up leaving right after I leave.